All right, guys, let's be real. Email freebies and random website banners are not cutting it anymore. Growing your email list and your bank account as a small business owner is more competitive than ever. People are not handing over their email or their hard-earned cash for something that doesn't feel valuable to them. And that's why you need Badao. And you can get 25% off your subscription with the code Elizabeth. So if you haven't heard of it yet, Badao is the ultimate software for supercharging your email list building efforts and making sure your website visitors see the right message at the right time. Badao works with all the best email marketing platforms like Flowdesk, ActiveCampaign, and Kit, you name it. And it was acquired and rebranded by Showit about 6 months ago, and I have been obsessed ever since. And honestly, if it's from Showit, you know it's going to be amazing. So here's a few ways I've been using Badao in my business so you get the picture. So showing a pop-up for a freebie only on my blog posts that are geared towards designers, displaying a coupon code to visitors right as they're leaving my site, promoting sales with the targeted pop-up for people coming from specific websites, and one of my new favorites, a feature of adding social proof pop-ups in the corner of a browser to show recent and real-time purchases or email signups. Badao makes it ridiculously easy to connect with your audience in a way that feels both personal and strategic. And seriously, I've had my mind blown by all the features like targeting new visitors differently than returning ones or popping up an offer after someone's browsed a certain number of pages. So here's the best part. Badao is offering 25% off for a limited time with the code Elizabeth. So this is the best deal you will find. And I'm so excited to share it with you because I know this will transform your business sales like it has mine. Head to elizabethmccravey.com/Badao. That's BDOW to snag this 25% off deal. Plus you'll find a free Badao template that I designed to help you get started. So again, save 25% with the code Elizabeth. And now let's dive into today's episode. All right, guys, this is an episode announcing a shift coming to the Breakthrough Brand podcast that I'm very mindfully making and I'm excited about. And I'm excited to share this with you. It is a big shift. And I'm giving you very much a behind the scenes look into how I'm running my own business this year, which I think will have some key things you can also take away from your business. And if you're someone who's curious of like, hey, what are other people doing to grow and maintain their business while also having other responsibilities in their life, this is for you. I'm going to be sharing more about what the changes to the podcast. And then we're going to go into a Q&A format where I'm going to answer all the questions you may have about this change. So let's get to it. Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, an online educator for entrepreneurs, website designer, wife, boy mom, and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want to dive deep into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a sustainable business that fits your unique lifestyle while standing out in a crowd, then you are in the right place. I created a multiple six-figure a year business in my early 20s, and now in my 30s, I'm still running that successful multiple six-figure a year business on just part-time hours now as a working mom. I'm here to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe that the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, website design, personal branding, mindset, time management as a busy parent, scalable and passive income, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Okay, guys, so this feels really big to say, but the announcement that I'm sharing, and please don't turn me off after this because I have so much more to say about this, but the announcement is that for the remainder of 2025, I'm changing up the Breakthrough Brand podcast to a seasonal format instead of releasing an episode every single week, just like forever ongoingly. So this episode you're listening to right now will be the last episode for a while. I'm taking a 3-month break. So this means I'll have some breaks in here from what you normally see of me constantly creating content. Again, starting with a 3-month break, I'm going to talk more about this and explain like what the other breaks are going to look like. Then I'm going to come back after 3 months, take another break, come back, etc. Have a whole schedule planned. And I want to share really clearly why I'm doing this, why this change. Like, is it a profit-driven decision? Is it a gut decision? What am I going to be doing if I'm not doing this? So I'm going to get into all that, but I want to be really clear first, after I say that information, because I know we all multitask when we listen to podcast episodes. I know I do, but I want to be really clear on some things. So first of all, I'm not closing my business, okay? Not even in the slightest. So don't hear me say that me pausing the podcast is a business closure or even a break from my business. I'm not doing that either. So I'm still going to be working on my business as usual, just with a break from creating new podcast content for a few months. So I'm currently working on some new template designs. I just made the spring coaching call schedule for Booked Out Designer and Podcast Success Blueprint. So like my courses and templates are all still very much for sale, and I'm plugged into my business and might even be plugging in more to some particular areas of it as I work on new things. So my business is not going anywhere. This is not a business closure type of episode. And I'm also not quitting my podcast. So this is not like a bye-bye podcast announcement. I love this podcast so very much. It's not going anywhere. I'm just taking a break. I'm taking a break from something I love. So although I think it's absolutely fine for someone to announce that they are quitting their podcast or quitting their business, I always applaud other business owners when I see that type of content, like you are consciously choosing to close your business or take a giant break. I think that's incredible and so admirable and such a power move. But I just want to be clear that at least for me, is not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm announcing here. I'm just taking a break from new episodes of the show. So business days, podcast days, break is what's happening. And I'll be back with more episodes post break. And then I'm going to take another break and then I'll be back again. Again, I have like a whole schedule figured out. So why? Let's talk about why with that. Now that we're all on the same page, a break, not a stopping. Let's talk about why. Why the break from weekly podcast episodes? Again, I have more Q&A that we're going to get into as we keep going, but just to explain high level for you, I'm about to celebrate 6 years of this podcast on March 5th, 2025, which ironically is also my son Ethan's birthday. I didn't even realize that was my podcast anniversary, and also ended up being the day he was born. So he's going to turn a year old March 5th. He obviously wasn't even close to born yet when I started the show in 2019, but my very first episode launched March 5th, 2019. And I had started all the prep work and planning for the show in winter 2018. So you could say already as I'm recording this, I've been working on this podcast for over 6 years now. And so I've been podcasting a very long time, okay? The 6 years is a long time to do anything in business. There's so much changes, right? All the time, but especially in the world of podcasting, which is still technically considered a newer medium, and it's one that is growing exponentially all the time. I'm always so happy when I see people start podcasts. I'm always thrilled with all the updates that the places like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube are all doing just to make podcasting more prevalent. I think it's amazing. But I do feel like I've been podcasting a long time, and I've kept up podcasting with ease because I love it. I truly love it. I see results from it. And you probably heard me say before in this show that podcasting is number one or is one of the top favorite things I do in my business. And that's true. And I feel like that's why I've done it so long, is because I see results and I love it. And I looked at how many weeks have happened since this show started March 5th, 2019, and it has been 312 weeks of life on our earth since this first episode aired. 312 weeks of content creation in my business, which this is crazy, but that's how I landed at 307 episodes, okay? Which that's insane for me to say. I was like very curious as I have been thinking about this break to kind of do some math. That is only 5 weeks without an episode airing in 6 years. And so to explain that a bit more, you might be thinking, wait, Elizabeth, I think you've taken more breaks than that. There were actually more weeks than that I did not have an episode. And the reason the numbers come out to only 5 missing is because there were a few different times where I aired 2 episodes in a week, like a part 1, part 2 situation. Or there was another time, I think 2 different times where I aired 3 episodes in a week. And of course, I've done things like recast and things like that. So not every one of those 307 episodes is a brand new episode, but you get the vibe. I have basically in 6 years taken off a week or 2 around the holidays. I always take off the week of Christmas from airing an episode, sometimes take off the week before or after Christmas. And that's basically it, okay? In 6 years and 312 weeks. And the biggest break I've ever taken from the show was when my first son, Colin, was born. And that was in 2021. And I actually prepped a ton of content for my maternity leave. So I had episodes airing every week all through my maternity leave. And then when I started back from maternity leave, I went to an every other week schedule for like 2 months. So that just even shows you can change up your show schedule however you want, whenever you want to fit your life. It works. But I did that for about 2 or 3 months just to cut back on how much time I was spending podcasting at the time. Because honestly, getting back to the swing of work post baby with my first was very hard. We did not have paid childcare yet. And I had a lot of other things going on in my business too, which I still do. And so I needed something that was like a recurrent thing to drop off a little bit. And at the time it was like, yes, okay, every other week for the podcast, that's going to help me so much. And so that was the break. And so what I'm going to do though, and that break again, just to reiterate, was going to every other week. After Ethan, my second, was born, I didn't take a break at all. I had episodes air through maternity leave and kept going. I may have skipped like 1 week or something, maybe. I don't even know if I did that. But what I'm about to do now of 3 months straight with no new episodes is the biggest break I've taken from the show in 6 years' time, which feels so crazy to me to think about. And if some of you are listening, you're like, I'm feeling disappointed that there isn't going to be a new episode every single week. Thank you for caring enough to be disappointed. I want to say that. I know it sounds kind of silly, but I appreciate you listening and caring to catch new episodes. So I appreciate that. And I hope you'll go back in and listen to some old episodes. And yeah, this does feel like both a sad thing and an exciting thing because I'm excited to take a break, but it's okay if you feel sad about it with me because this did feel like a big decision and, a difficult one, even though it's only 3 months. Again, I know it's like, this sounds like perhaps more dramatic than I mean for it to, but it did feel like a huge decision for me in my business. And it's more than a 3 month break, right? I'm doing 3 months and then coming back and then taking another break. So it feels like a bigger thing than that. But it's okay to be sad about it and it's okay to have questions. And I have a whole little Q&A we're going to get into with all of your questions. But let's just kind of explain a little bit more of the why. So if you were to ask me, and I do get asked this often by people who, when they hear that I've had a podcast this long, how do you come up with so many episodes? How do you show up and do a new episode every week? Especially being a mainly solo show. I think that's something that is often jarring to people because interview format shows it's a ton of work, but you're not always the one like coming up with the ideas, but I mainly do solo. So it's mainly my own ideas. And I would tell you, I do it easily because I truly adore this work. And I think when I kind of observe myself as a business owner, content creation is something that has come more naturally to me. And also teaching is something that I think comes natural to me in the sense that like, I can figure out how to teach something and make it practical. And I also really enjoy it. And my mom is a teacher. So I have some of that teacher in my blood. My dad was an entrepreneur. And so anyway, I feel like it's just something I love. And I've said it many times before, but this podcast is probably my favorite thing I get to do in my business. And I said that a minute ago, but that's what I think makes showing up consistently doable for me is that I love it. Sitting in front of a mic alone in my office, like I am right now talking to you, is a gift to me and something I look forward to. But with that, we still need breaks, even from things we adore and love and things that are going well in our business, which we're going to talk about that more in the Q&A. But this show is something that is going well for me. It's grown in downloads by a lot since when I started in like consistent, like weekly downloads and obviously overall downloads. And it's a consistent revenue generator for my templates and courses. I think this is one of the key things that's helped me build up my template shop to what it is today of being like one of the top show it template shops there is. And I've also made a lot of money through sponsorships over the years. So anyway, it's like done well, right? So it's not that anything isn't working. It's honestly that I just want to break from content creation and I want to see what business is like for a bit when I'm not always coming up with the next podcast topic to record. And I think breaks even from good things are good. And so I hope you seeing me consciously taking a break can show you that perhaps you can take a break from things in your business too. And the break doesn't have to be from something that like you hate and isn't working, right? So often it's like, oh yeah, you hate Instagram, don't do it. But this is not the case, right? This is something that I do like, but I'm still like, I'm observing myself. I'm observing everything going on in my life. And I think I need a break from this. So I want to know what it's like to have a few months of business where I'm not thinking about long form content creation or having something that has to happen every single week, but instead just focusing on other projects in my business, but also when it comes to marketing, things like short form content creation for social media, like as I want to. And I think it's going to be refreshing and ultimately will help me make even stronger episodes. And I'm very fascinated by this. I think it'll be a personal experiment that I will definitely report back to you guys in a podcast episode with results on, because it is like, oh my gosh, what will it be like going from having made an episode basically every week for 6 years to making nothing for 3 months straight? Like I know this, again, 6 years versus 3 months is a lot of difference in time, but I do think like that's drastic when you think about the change, and then having another break after that too. So I'm very curious. I'm curious of how I will feel not thinking about content creation as much. So I'm definitely going to do a lot of personal reflection time through this process of like, okay, Elizabeth, you're not thinking of like something to teach this week. How does that feel? In a sense, it feels a bit like a sabbatical for me, but just like from one area of my work. Like, okay, I've done this for 6 years. I'm going to take a break from this and see what happens, see what comes up, see what God shows me, see what new content ideas I come up with, but I'm not recording, right? So, do I think this is an especially profitable business decision? No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not a profitable business decision. My podcast brings in a lot of leads and revenue, which luckily I have years worth of content that will continue to serve my business and find people while I take a break. And I think that's a really cool and unique thing about podcasting and blogging as well. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but this is like not a financially motivated decision. It's a personal decision. It's this is what I need right now while I'm pregnant with our third baby type of decision. And it's also a curiosity decision and a listening to God decision. So I've been prayerful for a while now about cutting something back in my business and taking a break on something, right? And especially in this third pregnancy. So if you missed a few episodes back, episode 300, I shared all about expecting baby 3. You can go back and listen to that episode if you'd like while I'm having a break. But I'm about to have 3 kids, 3 and under, and this pregnancy is flying by. As you're hearing this, I'm 21 weeks pregnant. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I already over halfway there? So I think this will be a nice break for me, especially in light of how third pregnancies are often harder when you have other kids running around you're taking care of. And like I said, I love trying and testing new things, and I'll always think podcasting is a worthy endeavor in every way. It'll probably always be one of my favorite things. And I'm actually excited in my break to plug in more with my podcast Success Blueprint students. I have a course on podcasting, if you didn't know, which also feels funny to take a break when I teach people podcasting. But again, I hope this can be an example to you that perhaps you also could take a break from your podcast if you feel like you need one, right? But I'm excited to help my podcast Success Blueprint students with their podcast even more during this break. So anyway, long form content break, podcast break, here I come. I will absolutely miss these weekly episodes, but I'm excited to try this. Now I'm going to change formats, as we just said what all it is, and I said my reason for the rest of this episode to Q&A. So these are some questions I know you're probably wondering, and I also had my podcast manager help me think through these, and she thought of what you guys would be wondering. She also hosts a podcast, so she was coming at this from the angle of a business owner with a podcast, and so she helped me come up with some of these questions, some of them I came up with myself. So we're going to talk about why I'm taking a break from something profitable. Do I think my revenue will decrease? Is this a dad decision or a gut decision? What marketing I'll still be doing? How you could apply this sort of thing to your own business, and like how to make a gut decision in your business? How I decided on the format I'm going to do for a break, what I'll be doing while there's no weekly episodes, and a few more things. So let's get to it. I'm going to kind of just go through these questions. So first one, why are you choosing to take a break from something that's profitable? That might be something you're wondering. That's a great question. And I know I already mentioned this earlier in the episode, but I'm going to take a different angle at it right now. So this is not just me restating what I already said about it being a not profitable decision to take a break. But so often we talk about taking a break or quitting things in our business. When we talk about doing that, it's the things that are not working or the things that we hate. And I have an episode about this. It's called Your To Quit List. It's a really great episode. If you haven't listened to it, it's episode 260 of this podcast. Another one perhaps worth listening to while I'm on this break. But on that episode, I share things you should consider cutting from your business. And podcasting is not on that list, right? So people always talk about cutting the stuff that you don't like or the stuff that doesn't make you money. But business owners rarely talk about how sometimes you need to cut something you do enjoy and that might make sense on paper for your business, but that you need a break from, or that you need to just cut out completely. And so this is one of those types of decisions for me to take a break from something that is working and is profitable profitable. And I also feel as though my business is at a place where I can do this because there is so much content already, right? And the content is still relevant, even if it didn't air last week. So I don't know if I would have felt like or wanted to make this decision if I was like 20 episodes into my podcast, but at 307 episodes in, I feel comfortable taking a break from something that is working simply because I'm like, I want to take a break and it makes sense for me. And I put a lot of thought into this and this is what I'm going to do. So that is the reason why I'm taking a break from something that's profitable. Another question. Do you think revenue will go down when you stop having weekly episodes? So this is a great question. And honestly, I have no idea. Do I think it will? Perhaps. My podcast has been one of my top customer generators in my business for years now, often making up around 25 to 30% of sales. And by that, that's just referencing someone saying when they purchased from me, like, where did you hear about my products? They answered the podcast. So that's a really big amount, right? And it's still consistently that way. Like when I got a new template sale yesterday and the person came from the podcast, right? So that's really common for me. And so a question then is like, will that change simply because there's not a new episode for 3 months and there's another break after that, even when there's over 300 other episodes? Okay, I'm not sure. And I would guess that I may see some decreased revenue, but only time will tell. And I'm going to be paying attention to this for sure. And we'll try. It's always hard because financial data is so relative to the moment. So like there could be a decrease and be for something else, or it could be a decrease and this is literally why. So anyway, I'll kind of see and we'll report back. Obviously sponsor stuff will change and that's a spot I'd see a decrease in revenue, but then other streams of income could always make up for that decrease. I ultimately think though, it's likely that I will see a decrease. Like that would be my gut reaction and guess. But I'm making that decision, like knowing that. It's also worth noting though that podcasting does cost money, especially when you have a show that's been going on longer and has more systems in place. So some of my expenses will actually decrease for these 3 months, particularly paying my podcast editor and podcast manager. So that's the biggest decrease, right? Because often like expenses to team, whether contractors or employees, is a big business expense, right? And both of them were prepared months in advance for this change that like they will not be being paid by me for work during these 3 months. And we have kind of worked out exactly what that's going to look like and all that kind of stuff. So that's a decrease though in spending for me, right? And then I'll also likely pause at least one of my podcast related subscriptions. So that fee will be gone for a few months too. And that's just a little quick note here, pausing software subscriptions. Obviously you're not going to pause like a membership you're in or something like that, but a software subscription for a break in your business that's more than a few months or more than 2 months even, can be really smart if it's something that you can just like stop paying for and then pay for again. I know like when I've done maternity leaves, I've done things like quit paying for Zoom for like, 3 months or whatever. And that does add up, those kind of decisions, right? So I'm going to do that with some of the podcast related software that can make sense for me to stop paying for. Obviously something like my podcast hosting with Buzzsprout, I'm not going to quit paying for because my podcast would go away. But some of the other stuff I use, I could kind of stop paying for. And I'll stand by that podcasting, I believe, can be an amazing revenue generator for your business, an amazing way to acquire leads. That's literally what I teach all about in Podcast Success Blueprint. I'm teaching those skills that I've done to build this show to where it is. But it also is something you can take a break from if you want to and just kind of see what happens. So anyway, I don't know what will happen with revenue. We're going to see. Okay, next question. Was this a data decision or a gut decision? So this, my friends, is entirely a gut decision and a prayer decision, not a data one. If I was only going to go off data in my business, then I would increase my podcasting frequency to twice a week or 3 times a week, honestly. Like that would be the data decision, would be like do more episodes or like just pour more into this. Because my show is something that I've seen results from. So it's a good thing to throw more time, money, and energy at. But my gut and God is telling me like, hey, Elizabeth, take a break, come back stronger. You've literally never taken an actual break from this. So like, let's try taking a break. And I want to say too, as you think about decisions in your business, both data decisions and gut decisions are valid ways to make decisions. And I think too often in business, like every freaking thing is about revenue numbers and increasing followers or whatever else. And it's like, it almost is like if you listen to too much business podcast content or like educational courses and things like that, you would think that like every decision you make has to be driven by data and numbers and growth. And definitely making decisions that way is smart, right? But if that's all you use to make your decisions, you may end up burnt out with a business you don't even like. And that's not where I'm at. And that's not where I'm at because I do both gut decisions and data decisions, right? I have had my business 9 years now, about to be 9 years. And I feel like the way I've maintained it that way is because I'm not just making only data decisions, because that is a way you can just like run yourself into the ground and create a business you're not happy with. So this is a gut decision for me. Okay, next question. How do you make a gut decision like this? And what was the process for my particular gut decision to take a break from the podcast? So I find this interesting, and maybe you will too, but this was a longer process, okay, where I thought about the idea of a break for a long time. And it's interesting. The idea came to me, I feel like totally came to me from the Lord, but it actually, when I first had the idea, I originally dismissed it and was just like, no way, why the heck would I do that? I love podcasting. It's profitable. It's fun. It's my favorite thing. That's a bad idea. If I'm going to take a break from something, it should be something else. Like that was my gut reaction to it. And then I kept thinking on it and praying on it. And it just kept like, when I really looked at like, okay, I need to take a break from something. I want to cut something back in my business a little bit to make more time for other things. What am I spending consistent weekly time on? It was the podcast. And so it just kept coming back to me that like, hey, you've never taken a break from this. Never taken like a real break. Let's take a break. And it really felt like such a hard decision. So y'all, I actually cried when I told my husband, Adam, that I thought I was going to take a break. Like it felt like such a big thing. Like we're sitting up talking after the kids are asleep. And I'm like, I think I might take a break from my podcast. It just felt like huge to say it out loud and like overwhelming. I can even cry with my pregnancy hormones, thinking back to when I told him that, because it did feel like so overwhelming and huge to me. And it feels like less of a big deal now to me as I'm talking to you, because that decision was like 6 months ago or something. But when I was in the decision-making process, it felt like a lot. It felt emotional to me too, telling friends. I think I cried telling one of my friends, just being like, oh my God, this is so huge and so big. And I also worried that telling people this and even telling you this would make you think that I'm not all in enough on my business. And I can still worry that right now, that you listening may think that like Elizabeth isn't all in, she's not committed, things like that. You can worry about people thinking that way about you and your business when you pause or shift something. And it's a risk I'm taking anyway. But it is something that's come up for me. So if you've ever felt that way in your business, know you're not alone, that sometimes making big announcements, making big changes, you do wonder and worry, are people judging you? Do they misconstrue what you're saying? Are you being understood, right? Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. So I've struggled with that. And I hope you hear me in this episode and do understand. I pray that this is like an understood situation here and that I'm still committed to helping you in your business through my business. But anyway, to keep going with this, I told my 2 podcast team members about this actually mid-December. And I thought about it and like game planned on it a few months prior to that. And I told them mid-December to give them like plenty of time and also like really explain it well to them before we were actually taking action on anything. But how do you make a gut decision to kind of go back to that? So that's how I made this gut decision. It was just time and thinking and talking, and even like talking it through made it make more sense to me, I think, because it felt like such a big thing in my head I've never done. And then when I really say it and then like talk about it, I'm like, oh, that's actually more chill than I thought. So how do you make a gut decision? I think it's sometimes listening to the voice giving you an idea that does not make sense on paper. Like actually listening to that voice and not dismissing that voice as silly and being like, no, I never do that. That doesn't make sense. But giving that voice space to talk and be like, that doesn't make sense on paper, but I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to come back to that. And prayer and journaling with that. That's been huge for me in this of like, prayer, journaling, and also like just writing stuff out. Like I really did get out, pen to paper and also like, fingers to keyboard, and type out like, okay, what would this realistically look like? How can this make sense? And it all started to make sense when I really put down the ideas on like paper all the way and then started taking action on it. So, okay, that's my answer to like, how do you make, like, what was my process like for making this sort of gut decision? And now another question you may have is like, what advice would I give on making a tough business decision? I've made a lot of tough business decisions, honestly. In the 9 years of my business, closing my membership was a very tough decision, probably the toughest one I've made in my 9 years of business, which I did a few podcast episodes on that and other ones you could listen to while I'm on a break. I'll link to those in the blog post for this episode. elizabethcravey.com/307 will be that link. But advice on making tough business decisions. And this is something like if you've been kind of multitasking, I really hope you'll come back right now and hear me say this. But this is the best piece of advice I can give you. Not every decision is a forever decision, and most actually aren't in your business. So if you listened last week on the podcast, my interview with Emily Conley, she talks about this, that like not everything has to be like a forever thing. You can try something. And I think we often overthink things as permanent instead of being like, I'm going to try this for this amount of time, see what I think about it. Even doing something like closing something like I did with my membership, I had 165 people in it and closed it a few years ago. Even that isn't permanent. It was permanent in the sense that like that particular membership is closing, but that doesn't mean I can't ever do it again. I can't ever try a membership again in a different way. So things are just less permanent and also perhaps less of a big deal sometimes than you think. And it's okay to try things and take a risk and see what happens. And your business is a marathon, not a sprint. Your career is a marathon, not a sprint. And I talked about this a few weeks ago on the podcast, so I know some of you have heard me say that, but like it's not always going to look the same in every season, and that's good. I think a beautiful thing about being a business owner, particularly the kind of business I run and that so many of you run, is that you really can adapt it to your season of life. And so seasons of life change, and so do seasons of your business, and you don't have to do it all at once. I have had 6 years of growing and monetizing and thriving with this podcast, and I'm going to keep doing so, but I had 6 years of like doing it straight with like no breaks. And some of that time was before I was a mother. Some of it is since I've become a mother. None of it's been since I've had 3 kids, but like an intentional break in a different format and all of that, that's good. And that's worth trying after you've done something a while. And you're like, I like the way I've done this. I want to try something different, right? So you can do these same sorts of things in your own business. And it might be totally different than what I'm doing here. But maybe even as I'm talking about this change for me, you're listening, you're feeling like this is something Liz is right. It doesn't have to be that everything has to happen right now. I can try something that doesn't have to be permanent. So if you feel like there's something that you need to shift, consider doing it, pray about it, journal about it, think on it more. And it won't happen overnight to slow something down that's running really fast in your business. It's a process, but you can do it. You can take a break or quit something entirely if you want to. Okay, next question. What marketing efforts are you keeping Or are you literally just scaling back marketing completely and relying on stuff you already have to keep working? That was a question my podcast manager came up with, and I thought it was a good one. So I'm really not sure is kind of part of the answer here. So like for me, my podcast has always been very structured in how often I share an episode. I've been consistent, as I've said, where it's like every single week. Usually I'm batching a few episodes at a time, but then ultimately releasing an episode every week. I've not had that kind of structure for a while now with any other type of content in my business, any other type of marketing, I should say, in my business. So I am keeping basically all other marketing efforts. Those the short answer, but keeping them as they were, which is to say not super structured. So like, for example, I actually do think I'll show up more on Instagram with this break because I might want a place to make some content. But like with Instagram, I'm not going to like all of a sudden be like, I'm committing myself to 4 posts a week or 6 posts a week or stories every day or anything like that. I'm going to just like keep doing how I've been doing and kind of play it by ear and see what I'm feeling. But I do imagine I'll share more short form content on Instagram over this break. I also will still be sending emails to my email list, and I'm also hoping to do a bit more podcast guesting on other shows, perhaps during the time I'm taking a break from my own show. So if you do have a podcast and you would be interested in having me as a guest, feel free to reach out about that. And that's definitely a marketing effort, right? Being on other people's shows is a great marketing effort. I also plan to be doing some blogging during this time, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But that's just to answer your question, like other marketing efforts I'm keeping would be generally other things, just taking a break from this show. And I also may look into finding ways to promote older episodes, like pick out some episodes that I'm like, this was a really good one. It was really popular at the time. It was well received, but regular listeners might not be scrolling back to this. Or how can I find a way for more people to find this episode and, make the blog post better or whatever else? I'll probably be doing some things like that. Okay, next question. Do you think it'll work fine for every business owner to take a content creation break? So I think a lot of people listening, you guys, my podcast manager thought this too. A lot of people might be dreaming of taking a content creation break, right? Because content creation can feel like a hamster wheel. Sometimes it can feel really exhausting. And you often don't know if it's actually moving the needle for in your business, especially depending on what type of content it is. So I don't know. Maybe you can try. Would kind of be my answer of like, could this work for you? I can speak to like my own business. And I think the reason this can work for me is because I do have a lot of content already, which is not true for everyone. And podcasting does have great SEO that's always improving. I feel like Apple and Spotify and all these podcast platforms are like constantly trying to make the platform better so that it's more searchable and people can find episodes just by like being interested in a topic and go find it. But people find my show all the time just by like searching for something that they are interested in. And then they find an episode about that topic and they download the episode and then they continue listening to other episodes as well. Same thing with blogs that way. So I think it really just depends on your business, but you can always try it and pay attention to the data and pay attention to like, is it working? How do you feel without this thing happening in your business, and go from there. Okay, next question. This is another one Kara came up with. You've shared how most of your customers come through SEO in the podcast. Do you think that will be affected, or is this a nice thing about those platforms and strategy specifically of like SEO and podcasting particularly? And we say SEO, it stands for search engine optimization. And in my business, at least, when I talk about it right now, I'm mainly thinking about like blog posts and people finding those on a search engine like Google. So it's cool. I actually don't think that particular part of my business will be affected because those two things of like a podcast episode being relevant or a blog post being relevant are not dependent on new content happening on that same place. So for example, an episode that is 8 months old on a topic that someone really wants more information on is still relevant even if that show didn't have a new episode air that month. Like that person might not even realize that show didn't have a new episode air, right? They're just interested in this one particular topic. They're going to download that episode and listen to it, right? And the same thing is especially true for blog posts or a web page in general on your site. When you find something in a Google search, it doesn't really matter if there was a new blog post on that website in the past month. It matters that you care about what that particular blog post is, right? And obviously keeping your site up to date and current and creating new content helps with SEO. That's kind of a different conversation though. In my business in particular, though, like some of my top traffic generating web pages and content is from like over a year ago, and it's still working for my business. So I do think that SEO in particular and people finding old episodes that they like on something like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube even like won't be affected. And that is a nice thing about these platforms and this strategy specifically. And that's even a reason why, if you've heard me talk about on this show, the idea of just trying a podcast, because I think so many people are interested in starting a podcast, but they're like, I don't want to commit to 300 episodes like Elizabeth or whatever, right? I totally get that. And it feels really overwhelming to think about doing something forever. I think, well, first, a great thing is to remember that you can take breaks whenever you want. You can change the format. You can literally do whatever you want with your show. But also, like 20 episodes of a show that you never touch again may still actually help you bring new customers and leads and revenue to your business. It truly is that way. Like, so that's just a really cool thing about that kind of stuff is that you don't have to do it forever for it to end up being a good thing for your business. Okay, now let's talk about this question. How did you decide on the break format, on the seasonal format versus like going every other week or something like that? So, like I've said, I'm not taking a long time off. I'm just taking March, April, and May. So just 3 months of no episodes. And then my plan is actually to come back 4 to 5 episodes on, and then another break again for my maternity leave. And then I'll be back again in the fall. So I did, when I was thinking about like taking a break from the show, I thought about moving it to an every other week rhythm. I've done that before, like I said, but I ultimately decided that I like the idea of doing a more seasonal format where it is every week for a while. So like consistently showing up for a month or 3 months or whatever it is, and then taking a break. And I actually teach all about this in Podcast Success Blueprint on how to find a rhythm for your recording and airing of episodes and how it does not have to stay the same the whole time you have your show. Like you can try something and change it up, and you don't have to do a big announcement like I'm doing. If you do change it up, I feel like it's relevant because I have some like lessons in this for you. And it is a big break after not taking a break for 6 years. But there are tons of options. And I honestly looked at all the options I teach in the course as I thought about this. I'm like, what do I say in Podcast Success Blueprint about this? And ultimately seasons sounded really nice to me to like have a big break, especially when I think about this a little bit like a sabbatical. And then come back really well and intentionally. And so I like this format because I just made it up. It's centered around my personal life schedule, like when I'm due with a baby. But this format too, for me, is also strategic in that I'll be airing episodes all of October and November when Black Friday is approaching and when Black Friday is ultimately happening. So you can make your business work for you and don't have to stick to some artificial rules someone else made about how things should be done. And if you were to like decide, like perhaps for you, you're like, I want to move my podcast to a more seasonal format. It doesn't have to be seasonal of like 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off or something. You can divvy it up more and look even at like, when do you feel like your listeners are most engaged in podcasts? That's also a part of the motivation of when I'm taking some break time is like after I do a month on, I'll be taking a little bit of like a summer break when often podcast downloads are down more because kids are home from school and people have less time to listen to podcasts and you're vacationing, all the things. So anyway, you can make it work for your own business however you want. And you can kind of make a break decision based on your personal life, your promotional schedule in your business, and also what you think your audience wants and needs. All right, so I have 3 more questions and then we're going to close this one out. Okay, what will you be doing in your work life if not a podcast episode every week? So I'm excited to spend my intentionally limited work time that I have because I am with my kids a lot these days, but on other projects in the next 3 months. So I'm working on 4 new template designs. One is almost done and I'm really excited about these. So I will honestly be designing a lot. When I think about like what will take up my time on my like 2.5 work days a week, design, being in Show It, making new templates, and then ultimately coming up with the marketing for those, getting them all like set up to be used by customers. Like that's a whole process. Once you're done designing a template, you're not done. There's a lot of steps to do after that. So I'll be doing all that. And I'll also be doing more coaching and co-working calls for my course students in Book.Designer and Podcast Success Blueprint. If you're in either of those courses, go look at the call schedule and you'll see some fun stuff on there. there. And I'll also be blogging a little, like I said. So there's some blogs I've been wanting to write for a while that is content that makes more sense in a blog post format. Things like I want to update my blog post that's about postpartum freezer meals, just with some more things. I actually have 2 different recipes I want to blog. I'm not trying to become a recipe blogger, but I do think like stuff like that's fun for me. And I also have some like maternity and baby type posts I'm interested in writing that just would not make sense for a podcast episode, but do make sense as a blog. And I do want to feel like I'm having a long form content break. So it's possible that if like the blog posts feel like I'm not actually giving myself a break from that I won't do them. But I love, like I said, I love creating content, and I also love writing in particular with a blog post. So I think I'm likely to do that. But basically the like short answers, I'm going to be doing a lot of template designing would be the answer to that. Okay, next question. Are you taking even more of a break from business and working just like 1 day a week or something? That was the way Kara phrased. I don't think she knew I was going to include all these this way. But like, yeah, is this a bigger break from business completely, or is it just a podcast break? So I already only work around 2.5 days a week, and I'm with my kids otherwise. But if you've ever been pregnant or adopting, you know that the to-do list is giant as you expect a baby into your life. So I probably will spend some of the time that I have childcare for both kids doing some things that are not work related, but more like preparing for new baby work. So a few of those things just to give you an idea. Buying a new car. We're going to get a minivan. I'm actually really excited about that. I think someone asked me on Instagram when I did a little Q&A, and I never got to answer it, but like, do you think you'll get a minivan, expecting a third and having like 3 in car seats? And originally I was thinking I want it, but then as I've like really done tons of car research, which is again, something I've been putting time into that perhaps is sometimes happening when I have childcare, I've decided to get a van. So actually yesterday went and test drove some, and I kind of narrowed down what kind of van I want. But I got to do that, buy a new car. And then we're also going to sell one of our cars, because we don't need 3 cars, obviously, to have that new car. And so like, that's a lot of work right there though. Another thing, moving my office to our bottom floor office. Adam and I are combining offices because he doesn't really need a home office. So his office is going to become my office. And then our son Colin's room is going to move to my office. And then his bedroom is going to become the nursery. And if that sounds confusing, it's because it is, because it's a lot of moving of stuff. And again, that's stuff that takes time that I need to have in my schedule, and that Adam also needs to have in order to do all that. We also have to install new doors on my future office, because right now it's not very soundproof and I need to be more soundproof. Designing a baby nursery. I'm going to buy a chest freezer for our garage to store more freezer stuffing. So our freezer in our house just not cutting it. Going to appointments for baby, because you have all these appointments, right? I'll also have my glucose test somewhere in this break, which is like a half day of work somewhere in there. There's just so many pregnancy to do things. But to answer the question, like, I'm not really changing up work stuff and necessarily working less, but at the same time, similar to what I've had to do in my other pregnancies, I'm taking some work time and dedicating it to things for my family and expecting a new baby, because it's all got to get done before July and there's a lot to do. Okay, last question. What should you do while there's a break? First of all, I'll have a post that goes with this episode when it airs, and I'd love to hear from you about this change and any additional questions you have. Maybe I'll do a Q&A on my stories this week to answer more questions. Because I get that, like, as I come to the end here, you might be thinking like, oh, I had a question that I didn't even touch on at all. So anyway, come talk to me over on Instagram. I'll be sharing more, and I probably also will be maybe doing more Q&A, things like that during the time I'm not making content here. And then I also really want to encourage you to listen to old episodes. Some of you guys maybe haven't been listening regularly, but you came back for this episode because this was an interesting title and you're curious what I'm changing. So I just encourage you to listen to old episodes. And if you ever want to like search on your podcast player for a particular topic, you can type in breakthrough brand and then whatever the topic is you're looking for. So like breakthrough brand SEO, breakthrough brand, motherhood, or mom, or whatever. And you're going to get the different topics, the episodes I've done on that topic, right? It's going to pop up in your search bar and you can download those and listen to them. You can also do the same thing on my blog. Just go there and use the search bar and, search for website tip or whatever else. And I have everything really well organized and categorized. And then you can find episodes that way and listen to them that way as well. And so anyway, I would just encourage you that if you do miss weekly episodes, to go in and listen to some other ones. And then also I'd encourage you to get on my email list where I'll be sharing some stuff there. I might share some more behind the scenes content there even. And then if you do want to learn from me in a different format besides the podcast and also get coaching and community, consider joining a course. I have 2 courses, Booked Out Designer and Podcast Success Blueprint. I'll link to both those in the show notes so you can get more information, but that's a great way to learn from me. And also if you want to learn Show It as just an everyday user, get one of my templates so you can take my Show It Blueprint course and you can have an awesome website to use for your business. So there are other ways to work with me is the point besides just listening to this podcast. So I encourage you to do those things. Check out my template shop, elizabethcravey.com/shop. And the courses are both on my website as well. But I would just encourage you to listen to old episodes is a short answer while there's a break, and come connect over on Instagram where I'll share, any interviews I do in other shows and also do some more Q&As and perhaps more short form content over there as well. So anyway, thank you for listening all the way to the end of this episode. And thanks for hopefully being supportive of me in this break. Again, I feel really excited about it. It feels weird right now as I'm about to put up this mic being like, I'm not going to be getting this out again for a little bit for my own show. Perhaps I'll get it out again for an interview on someone else's show, but not for my own, which does feel odd. But again, I'm excited for the break. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being a listener. And I hope you enjoy some old episodes while I'm on this break. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you got so much value from this episode. If you're a fellow podcaster or you hope to start a podcast in the near future, then you need to check out my program, Podcast Success Blueprint. This course is truly podcasting from A to Z. I cover all the getting started steps like naming your show, creating intros and outros, cover art design, and all things podcast tech. And that's where most podcast courses stop. But Podcast Success Blueprint is literally just getting started at that point. You'll go on to learn things like how to create successful solo episodes and interview episodes, how to market your podcast and grow your listeners, how to create streamlined systems so that your podcast does not take over your life, how to make real money from your show. Yes, real money from your podcast, one of my absolute favorite modules. And we even dive into things like guesting on other podcasts to grow your business and hiring a team to help you manage your show. Yes, it is beyond the basics, and I'm teaching you everything you need to know to grow a successful show that is the top of funnel marketing strategy for your business. Head to elizabethmccravey.com/PSB, short for Podcast Success Blueprint, to get all the details and join this incredible program. I hope I can help you in this program as you build your podcast and market your business. All right, that's it, friends. I cannot wait to connect with you again next week. Bye for now.